Hey everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Dog Trainer's Thoughtbook. I'm your host, John Clausen. I just wanted to say, before we talk and introduce our first guest, I started this podcast with the intention of highlighting trainers from all over the world, especially those with inspiring stories. So that's why today we have a very special guest who's not only a dog trainer, a great dog trainer at that, but like myself, has dealt with cystic fibrosis his entire life. Before we get started, I also want to just talk a little bit about what cystic fibrosis is. Cystic fibrosis, or CF for short, is a genetic disorder that compromises the function of the lungs and the pancreas. There's only about 40,000 people in the US with cystic fibrosis, and because of that, there really hasn't been a lot of recognition. But recently we have thankfully made a lot of strides in modern medicine, and there has been a lot more recognition today. With that being said, having cystic fibrosis, it takes a lot of time out of our everyday lives to upkeep our health. So today, I really want to talk about dogs, but I also want to highlight our special guest and his story and how inspiring he truly is to not only myself, but to anybody that is dealing with something in their life, whether that be physical ailment, mental health ailment, anything else far and in between. I believe that you'll really be inspired by where Nicholas began with his life and where he is today. So without further ado, I'd like to officially welcome my first ever guest, Nicholas Bell of the Dog Paw Canine Training, located in Omaha, Nebraska. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining today. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Hello. Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here.
Pleasure. And really appreciate your time. So I really want to get into, I really want people to know who you are. And I want them to know that even from, young age and what your life looked like. And then, to the apex of where you are today. So when you were born obviously with cystic fibrosis in 1983, I believe, what did things look like then? And what did doctors have to say to you and your family at that time?
Sure. I was 6 months old when they discovered it. And the outlook they gave my family was I would be lucky to live past 28.
Wow.
So that's always kind of been a marked number for me in my life. I remember wanting to reach it and surpass it. And now every year that I make past it again, I kind of put up a little post on Facebook like, take that cystic fibrosis or take that doctors. And now living, 13 years past my life expectancy at that time. Obviously it's increased. I think it's in the 70s now, maybe, due to all the advancements. But it was a pretty dire outlook for family or a parent to have their child be diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So at that point, the airway clearance that we did was more of like a wand. It was called a percussor. And I had to lay across my parents' lap and they would do it on my back and I'd have to rotate and they'd do it on my side. And it was pre the vest, which for those that don't know is kind of our most effective means currently of clearing the airway. It's looks like a life jacket, fills with air and shakes the crap out of you for 30 minutes at a time in order to get some of your airways clear. So it was a lot of work, as it still is today for any individual, but I think there was a lot less hope back then because there just wasn't the advancements that there are currently.
Sure. Yeah. And even for me in 92, things have changed so much and they seem to change quicker now. Every 5 years or so, something really big comes out. And we're very grateful, obviously. But I think it's hard for people to see, especially anybody with a chronic illness, but with CF, you look at us. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we look sick, So I think it's hard for people sometimes to understand the upkeep. Sometimes when we're ill, it takes hours out of our day, and it takes hours out of our day in general, but hours out of our day to do this physical therapy, I'd call it, for our CF. So I think that it's pretty crazy compared to where things were, not only modern medicine, but just education and all the things coming out. So I think that where you got to now is absolutely amazing. So 41 years old and working full time with dogs, which is a pretty physically intense job, is awesome. So totally have so much respect for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's nice to have those examples because, there's definitely a lot in the community who are older that I'm able to look up to. And, I'm grateful to be able to set an example, just have that physical and mental capacity to do so. Because sometimes the disease can take everything. I mean, not just like someone's life, but like their whole day.
Mm-hmm.
And we work so hard just to breathe. So, props to everybody out there that's thriving and surviving with cystic fibrosis, but especially some of those older patients who've been able to live into their 60s and 70s.
100%. And, with all that being said, when you started to get into your teens, and this is something I want to talk about too for myself because it's something I've dealt with, but into your teens and high school years in college, I was always one to be a little bit, I guess, ashamed of all the medication and the nebulizing and all that stuff. And I think it's just because I knew people didn't really understand, like, what the hell is this life jacket? You know what I mean? And what is that?
Yeah.
What is that compression nebulizer? What is all that? What are those pills? And I got those questions a lot with like the digestive enzymes we take. Like, what is that? What are those? So
yeah, it's embarrassing.
Is that something that you dealt with and sometimes maybe even still today?
Sure. I felt shame and embarrassment. I think that's pretty natural for most people with the chronic illness. And it can be difficult with cystic fibrosis in particular because it's invisible.
Sure.
So unless somebody knows you have it, yeah, their questions are going to come. And I went most of my young life hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt safer to not share it. It was a personal thing that my family knew about, my friends knew about, that were close to me, but I certainly had a group of friends that I didn't want to share that information with. And I think that changed as I aged. There were certain people that I felt comfortable with at particular times in my life. Then there were moments in my life where I just hid it from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think college was one of those moments because it was like, you're away from home. It's, there's not like the watchful eye reminding you to take your medications, do your treatments. And so I just opted not to because I didn't want to like slow down my life and
Sure.
have it be interrupted in that way, which is problematic because it's going to catch up to you one way or another.
100%. Yeah, I totally relate, obviously, and that's why I wanted to mention it. And I was kind of curious because, I'm sure not everybody feels that way, but I feel like a good majority, and definitely affected my social life. And I think me in general, just not wanting to share that part of me. And I think that kept me closed off a lot socially in some ways. So, as I've gotten older now, I'm a lot more open about it, but it definitely has a lot. I think that's a big effect, and obviously not feeling well too, but like that is a big part in everyday life too. Being able to share that with somebody at the time was a big deal. And I would kind of hide it, like you said, and looking back, it's kind of silly.
Sure.
But even to this day, there's some times I don't want to pull out my 8 Creon digestive enzymes during a meal or something, if it's a big meal, and have people see that. I just don't want people, I don't know what I think they're going to think, but it does look pretty crazy. And I don't know, it is what it is. But
I think we're more cognizant of it.
Yeah, than other people are.
I'm fortunate enough now and I look old enough. They're like, that guy probably needs some pills before he eats.
Yeah, no, I feel that. That's funny. Yeah. So college, you said, just talking more about this, is that when you began to shy away from your health? Did you dorm and didn't want to really bring all that stuff out? Is that what kind of happened, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was good about it for a little while, but I certainly had those instances where it just like was in the rear view.
Sure.
And not something I wanted to be looking forward to doing.
Sure.
And especially explaining to what were going to be new set of friends. So yeah, it just kind of felt safe. Like when I had to do the medications, I closed my dorm door.
Mm-hmm.
But we otherwise were a pretty open door. We wanted to meet people, and I had a good friend that roomed with me going into it. So that helped a lot. Like if I had a complete stranger, I think I would have been even worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually like one of the main reasons why I didn't dorm. and stayed local was that. I was like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? So I give you credit for putting yourself out there and saying fuck it and doing it.
Yeah.
Me, I was like, fuck no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. And it is what it is. Like, but I definitely didn't get the full college experience because of that. It's a lot different than dorming, but yeah, no,
Sure.
That totally makes sense. And so going off of that, but also moving around a little bit, was there any point in time in early childhood and up until college, before we get into your early career stuff, that dogs played a big part in your life, or that not at the time?
I had a uncle who had Doberman Pinscher named Abby.
Okay.
And what was pretty wild about Abby is she lived to be, I want to say like 19. I know it was 18 for sure, but really old for a Doberman. And I saw the way that my uncle interacted with that dog and the kinship that they had. And, you know, I wanted that. And we got a dog when I was young, but because I was like so consumed with my own health, my brothers were both like teenagers, I think. Like none of us took care of it. And so my mom, you know, ended up rehoming the little Boston Terrier that we had that like escaped every 2 weeks and ran across busy streets. You know, we weren't well equipped to, because I mean, I'm a kid at that point.
Yeah.
So.
No, I hear that. Okay.
But that was really it, you know, and then on to college. My brother and I each had Huskies growing up. And so that was where it kind of first started to play its role in my life, you know, in a more personal way.
Got it. Awesome. So your uncle, would you consider that one of the first influences, though, of your thought process towards dogs?
Yeah, for sure. And I tracked that back, you know, thinking like when I first became a dog trainer, I was like, where did my interest spark? You know, I was curious. And I kind of tracked that back to Abby and just spending lots of time with my uncle. They lived pretty close, so I could like bike over there. And he lived with one of my other uncles. So the two brothers lived together. And, you know, if one of them wasn't there, I'd go just because the other one was. And if they were both there, of course, I'd go show up and just try to hang out with them as much as I could. The other one was a coached basketball and soccer. And, you know, funny enough, I also went on to coach.
Nice.
So I'm kind of like thinking about that right now, how both of them played a pretty pivotal role in my interests later in life.
Yeah. And I think that's something, I'm so happy you mentioned that. Like, people don't realize how much coaching dog training really is. It's more that you're a coach than the person that changes the dog. It's the owner at the end of the day. And we could only guide and coach so much. So like being an effective coach, probably doing that probably helps you so much. And some of the other things we'll talk about too, probably helped you so much transition a lot easier than some people. And with that, I know you were saying past college, you went to college for creative writing, right?
Yep. I went to school for poetry.
Okay, poetry. And then after college, talk us through some of those jobs that you went through, especially the ones I believe you were doing something with poetry or speech therapy, was it?
Yeah, so I went and ended up getting my master's in creative writing as well. And in the middle of that program, I got a job for a nonprofit. And we went in and we would teach poetry to different high schools, middle schools, organizations. I even started a program where we went into prisons and we just taught creative writing. We taught storytelling. We would sometimes hold what's called a slam poetry event where it's like competitive and you pick random people in the audience to be judges. And that program definitely set the basis for success for me in this gig because I'm in front of people talking. I'm comfortable doing that. I'm getting a lot of experience building curriculum. So not just taking what someone else is doing and being like, this is how I teach it to someone else. It was like, we're actually designing what we're teaching and then delivering it to, you know, the people or the organization. So that job helped me out tremendously. I mean, just as an individual from a confidence standpoint too. So then after that, I worked at a dental laboratory and kind of did some marketing mostly for them. And so that helped a lot with the knowledge of just how do you market yourself? How do you build a brand? How do you stay on top of people's minds? And I also went on to coach soccer and football at the high school where my one uncle I mentioned earlier coached for, I think, like 40 years almost.
Wow. Yeah, so you have a lot of good stuff though that got you to this point. I feel like the poetry, the coaching, like we said, that really built a good foundation to get into dogs. Even if you didn't have any, much dog knowledge prior, you had all the most important things. 'Cause I feel like the leash stuff is just experience and feel, but there's so much more that goes around and goes into building a business. And that's awesome that you had those experiences. And I'm sure that you use those every day in your everyday life, sounds like. So that's cool.
Fortunate. Yeah, definitely. My experience that preceded dog training set me up for, good success in this endeavor.
Sure. So tell me, after all that, what was it that began to change your thinking that, okay, this stuff, what I'm doing now isn't really for me. And I think I want to get into dogs. What was that one moment that propelled that train of thought?
So I initially just had the interest and had my own dog. And then I started dating my now wife. She had a dog. People saw how I was with my dogs. And so friends, family would hit me up when they had trouble with theirs. And back when that was happening, I never would have even sort of dreamed that it would become my full-time gig. I'm just like, I have this interest. I'm able to help, so I will. And I did it just for the experience of it because I was interested. It's like someone likes archery and you have an opportunity to go shoot arrows. Like,
why not?
Go take that opportunity to go shoot arrows. And then when I did move in with my wife, my husky started to have some issues with her small dog in that she was going after the dog. She was also in the beginning going after the cat. And trained a lot of that out, got the situation with the cat under control. But just real randomly, she would lash out and attack our little Pomeranian, Todd, who's since passed away. May he rest in peace. And because of that, I had to go get her trained. And so the place I took her to get her trained said, they were really impressed. They're like, you make my job difficult because your dog's already really well trained. You're just having this sort of off the wall issue. And they told me that they thought I would make a great trainer. So that owner sort of planted the seed and I just kind of watered it. At that point, I wasn't healthy enough to work full time. I was on disability after a pretty significant life event. And when I was healthy enough, the plant grew, I got a job, and that was what got me into it.
That's awesome. And we talked before, you began with, I believe it was one of the big box companies, right? For about half a year to a year and a half. Can you tell us a little bit about that and then the transition to going on your own and branching out?
Sure. Yeah, so I worked for Off Leash Canine. The place that I worked was a franchise of that. They sent me out to do the training, and it's like 17, 20 days, I can't remember. And it was helpful in the sense that some of the people that were there that knew what they were doing, that I was able to observe. And from the standpoint of what they were trying to deliver as education, it was a joke as a teacher, not to like throw someone under the bus, but from a curriculum standpoint, I was just like, I feel like I could design a better program than I'm the one in it taking it.
Right.
And so the test at the end especially was really bogus. And so, no shade to them. I mean, sure, hopefully they've kind of updated some of their processes and whatnot. And it got me in the door. But I also was wanting to just do things differently. I think they're sort of the company that's like, let's just throw an e-collar on every single dog. And I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do. I prefer and believe that you should train the people and the dog in front of you. And I think none of us should be so tied to any ideology that we neglect helping someone who truly needs our help when they came in the door.
Sure.
So it was just, sort of a, split of, ideology and me wanting to do things a little differently, but also health, and how that affects, and perhaps having a better control of my schedule just ended up being a better route. So after a year with them, I started up the Dog Paw. And I had already, because the way they design it, you're supposed to have your own LLC. So I had already started my brand. I had already been building that. And thankfully I did it because I didn't really predict that I would go off on my own so early.
Sure.
But it worked out and it's been great ever since.
That's awesome. And I saw too, I don't know how many you have now. You have over 100 5-star Google reviews. And how long has that been since your first review? Like, how long have you built that up?
It would have been like January 2022.
Oh, wow. That's a really good trajectory. That's a big growth.
Because I signed a 3-year lease. And so I'm like coming up on the end of that here in a few months. Yeah, that was when I first really designed a Google page for myself, because prior to that, I just pushed all my reviews to the company that I worked for.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that probably played a part in it too. You're building your own brand, but they're profiting off of the work and the branding. So that's kind of not beneficial in the most efficient use of your skills. So I feel like you probably seem like a pretty cerebral person and thought about all that too, and kind of pushed yourself to go on your own.
I think the owner was a little intimidated. And at times I just was like, you designed this to be this way. You asked me to make an LLC, so I have to give it a name.
Sure.
And I'm the kind of person that's visual, so I'm going to give it a logo too.
Yeah. You didn't want to just be like Nick Off Leash Canine LLC.
Right.
Yeah, no, I feel that. Do you have any, obviously it sounds like for you, for the most part, everything has worked out. Do you have any, wouldn't call it regrets, but do you wish you knew anything prior to going on your own? Was there anything that you hit roadblocks in the beginning that you were like, oh man, I wish I knew this, or I wish I knew that?
Yeah, I wish I would have mentored longer.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that I would have been able to sort of have a different experience with being taught how to be a trainer.
Sure.
And perhaps a longer one. Mine was pretty short and then into the fire. But I also, of all the people that I was going sort of through it with, I was just really eager. When they were like, all right, it's your, now it's your turn to start trying out lessons. Who wants to go? I was just always like, I'll go. Didn't care what the dog was, didn't care what the person was. And so I think that you just there's so many subtleties to dog training, and there's so many things that can come up that you're just not always going to catch in a short window.
Sure.
And I think a month is a short window. So I was lucky that I had a lot of experience. I had read a lot of books. I was obsessed as a kid with Cesar Millan and just watched any dog show I could consume, knowing that not all of it was great information, sure, but that's valuable too.
Yeah. I think that for you, it worked out going on your own pretty early because you had all that other experience prior and you had the hands-on there with them. So it worked out. I do see sometimes, myself included, kind of go on their own too fast, which I did that. Mm-hmm. And I think it was about 6 months only. I did hands-on with my first mentor, who I'm still in contact with, and we worked together on some events and stuff. She's awesome. But I learned basic handling. I had basic handling, but dog training in group class initially, in group classes that were 8 to 12 dogs. So it was really, you got to really move fast and react and respond. And it's just too much for some people, and me included, mentally. And even some of the dogs, obviously, it's too much for. It's not really a conducive, I think that's the word, learning environment for them.
Yeah.
And so, for some of them. But yeah, that was my first dog training experience, which I had great experience. I've learned a lot. It takes a lot of pressure off of you when you just have one dog in front of you now. But as time went on, I started to think, okay, well, what else can I learn? And I did do that. I did classes on Learberg, and I followed Tyler Muto and people like that. And Larry Crone and all that. But I felt like I was taking a lot of pieces from each person, but I wasn't really getting the big picture. And I still feel like that at times when we learn, we're going to take pieces, and it's how do you sprinkle that into your style and your teachings? Because with each mentor that you've had and I've had, I don't want to follow the exact piece by piece. If I do that, I'm just going to become probably a lesser version of them because I'm copying.
I mean, a mess too.
That too.
Like if it's too many things together.
That too. Yeah. And a mess. If you try to combine everybody's teachings together and use every single one, they're going to contradict and confuse you. So that's where people need to compartmentalize and say, okay, well, I'm not taking this piece. And that's, I think, good advice for any new trainer or trainer in general. It's like, I'm not taking this piece, but this piece I really like, and I want to sprinkle this into my program. And how can I do that? And that, I think, that's something I wish I knew. I didn't really understand that up until probably the last year or so. It's like, I can't put every piece of what this person is saying into my style. That's not me. So I have to take what is me, what is it that resonates with me that I know will be beneficial to the owners and their dogs. So I think that is a big piece to take from mentoring, whether you're doing a program online or in person. I think that is a really big piece to take.
Yeah. I'd say one of my other regrets was I did too much of the business on my own in the beginning. And I'm happy I did it that way because it did make me figure it all out. And now I don't have to pay someone.
Sure.
But like when and if you can, if you're new, like don't get a facility until you need it. And thankfully I had that problem. Like I needed it. I was driving all over the city and I was like almost falling asleep at the wheel from how many lessons I had in a day.
Yeah.
And so the facility helped, but I vacuumed this place for 2 years before I got a Roomba. And that thing was the best thing I've ever done for myself because now I'm not like counting these lines as I vacuum this place every time I leave.
Do those work pretty good?
Yeah, I got one that like mops a little too. So in the winter, like when the salt comes from, dogs' feet or people's boots into my space, I can use that and just hit a button and it's clean. I also did all my own taxes and like the sales and use tax monthly form that I hated. But now that I know it all, it's a lot less stressful. In the beginning, it just felt like so much though.
Sure.
It's like I went through a lot of undue stress.
That makes sense. And what else so since we're already talking about a little bit of business stuff, we'll skip around a little bit. What else do you use in terms of making things easier for you? For me, I use JotForm for like a client questionnaire intake form. But what are some things I think with scheduling you do Square Up that I was looking into a little bit?
Yeah, we talked on that. I use the Square scheduling app, and it's really been a lifesaver for me in the sense that I started to just kind of have people forgetting appointments or, showing up late or whatever. And so being able to just have a system that sends a reminder is a huge help. It keeps your time valued and keeps me organized really because sometimes people text or call me and they tell me their name and I don't know who they are until I go and search and find out their dog's name.
100%.
So, from that standpoint of just like, who is that again? And then I go look and, oh, right, now I can visualize who they were. And,
nice.
So, Square helps a lot. And I did finally start an intern, and they're going to be starting to do some lessons for me here this year. So I initially only wanted to ever do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But a situation just kind of presented itself. The person was a good fit. And so that's been a blessing too, because it's helped from that standpoint of I got to get stuff filmed and, I don't have an extra hand. So
I hear that, man.
I think the community and colleagues are so important in this business.
Yeah, I think that those things are super important. And I think for me too, is the same thing. I wanted to do it on my own, and I think I over-isolated a little bit, but other trainers that are starting off, I would encourage them to have those conversations with other trainers in their community. And I have some good friends now and stuff, and I'm very grateful, and I recommend them and refer them and vice versa. And I only have a few that I'm pretty tight with, but I'm lucky. And they're some of the best trainers, I think, at least in their reputation in the area. And I think it's good to have those relationships to bounce ideas off of. And like you said, even administrative things like when I was doing board and trains, I'm running around with a camera, a tripod, a leash, an e-collar. I have treats. Like that's just trying to record verbally too, like the lesson and the video. It's
a lot.
It's like it's just too much, and then I'm like spiraling. Don't even know what I hit the record button for here. We're trying to teach place, and it became 40 different things. But so I totally can relate to that. I think that's great you're doing that, and best of luck with that. And I wanted to say too, and you probably can agree here for sure, when I used to look at my intake forms, I used to take them way too literally. And I had to kind of learn that sometimes people are just filling out stuff like that really quick. So don't take that verbatim, because usually after a call, I'll dig deeper and ask, oh, so your dog isn't on a meal schedule, they're not crate trained. Well, like, oh no, they use the crate at night and I feed them once a day, but it's not a particular time and day. I'm like, okay, but they're not free fed? They're like, no. So that for me, I would have assumed off the rip, oh, this dog's free fed and isn't crate trained. Well, you need to start here, if I sent an email. So I think a good thing to think about is don't take it verbatim, really dig deeper, both on the phone and then in person to be able to make your best recommendation after that.
Yeah, asking the client a lot of questions, getting them to talk more has been a godsend from it's something I just always luckily did in the beginning. Like before I ever bring the dog into this space, we sit up front at my desk and we just talk. And I tell you, I learned so much little intricacies that way that I'm able to solve problems better because I know the fuller story.
Sure. Yeah.
And they leave out stories and they misuse words.
Yep.
They think reactivity when it's actually aggression. They downplay aggression, say it's reactivity.
Nip is a bite.
Yes, that's the big one.
Yeah.
Well, the dog's nippy.
Yeah, it took like four puncture holes 3 or 4 different times only in the last, 2 months. No, I hear that. Exactly. When you do meet with your clients, is there anything you're looking for in terms of green flags and red flags to say, okay, well, this is going to be either a good experience or maybe an experience I'm not willing to have?
Yeah, I think you can kind of tell when they're sort of looking for that quick fix.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just America, quite frankly.
It's hard.
All of us want like whatever we're after right away. So when people are receptive to me saying, look, this is sort of a drawn out process and here's the things that I'm going to expect of you. And they're not like either silent or if they are in front of me, they're just like deer in the headlights.
Yep.
Because sometimes you tell people stuff and you're like, I mean, this is what it's going to take. You got a dog and you've got an issue with this dog. So if you want to keep it,
yep,
these are the kind of steps. And so I think people really will kind of be taken aback when you're like, well, here, I want you to use the leash in the house and have the dog drag it. And they're like, all day?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, the leash in the home, man.
24/7. Yeah.
I wish I could teach every person in the globe who owns a dog how important it is to just use the leash in the home.
100%. Yeah. I think that for clients and for people that are listening that are dog owners, any kind of behavioral issue can at least be managed with having the leash on in the home, whether it be jumping, really anything. Having the leash on the home gives you full control of the experience right there in real time, where you can put a stop to something really before it happens even. And, and the dog isn't able to do it anymore. Once you see the dog doesn't try to do it for a while, then you can try to fade off into a leash tab, things like that. Some people will just jump to the leash tab and then the dog is like very smart and like starts doing that stuff, and dipping.
Yeah.
So leash on in the home is something that I'm really big on, especially if dogs are getting into it. All that stuff. If you have a dog that's getting into it with another dog, make sure that your resources are separate if it's like over food or toys. But leash on the home is a big one. I agree 100%.
Yeah. And as far as green flags, I'd say I love when someone shows up and they've got like a backpack just full of, oh, well, I brought this. They got different leashes, they got different treats, they brought toys. And I tell people to bring certain things, but I really appreciate it when they go all out. There's one client in particular I'm thinking of who they were a couple living separately that moved together. One of them had a cat and the other one came in with the dog. And so they're trying to move them in together. And this guy would show up with his backpack just full of all of his, like he was going to college, but it was all for his dog.
Yeah.
It's like water bowls and treats and toys and just everything. And to this day, that guy's still one of the best clients I've ever had because he just works hard at it.
Nice. Yeah. I think too, for me, a green flag, I just started going back in home for the first time in a while, feel comfortable to do it with an assistant, a couple months out of back surgery. But long story short, I started speaking with this lady and she's already sending me videos when we even do our first session. I started having her get on a protocol a little bit, and she's sending me videos of the dog's exercise routine, and she drives her quad and the dog runs through the property and started feeding him in the crate, doing crate training, all that stuff. She sent me even though it's like 7-8 minutes of videos, I already get a good feeling that this lady's invested, super invested, and I'm going to have a good outlook. And they've already worked with 2 other trainers. But when I receive back the effort or even close to the effort that I put in, that's 100% somebody I want to work with. If I don't, might refer, might do a referral. Yeah. But I used to be, and I think being the way that I started is a lot different than most, is I was really invested in my local animal shelter, 2 different ones, but I would train some dogs that were there for 400 or 500 days. And I got some really great, some of it's luck. Some of it is just, I feel like pure determination, because I would go and just be there almost every day. And I would throw everything in the book at these dogs because they were not in a good spot. They were not going to leave.
No.
So I had a few that I really made some really great progress with compared to where they were. And 400 or 500 days, a dog to leave with some training too. And, it had to be a good fit. But I think that opened up the door that people thought I was like a miracle worker. You know what I mean? And got a lot of unrealistic inquiries. It's like, oh, well, this dog bit 8 people, is 7 years old. And can you fix him in a couple sessions?
Yeah.
And being naive back then, I would take on anything I could because that was the way I knew. I was like, oh, well, yeah, I helped this dog out. Let's try it here, and that stuff, I think for new trainers, you really have to be careful of overstepping your skill level early on or your experience level. Mm-hmm. And I feel like everybody will meet their match in terms of the dog that tells them, all right, well, that was either a bad evaluation where I was wrong there, and this stuff that we're going to do isn't going to make the progress we thought. But yeah, I think that being a new trainer and things like that, you need to really vet your clients and vet the dog too that you're working with so that you don't bite off more than you can chew and become discouraged. So that's something I really learned the hard way as time has gone on. And in a good way, though, it's helped me have good insight. But have you ever had that in the beginning of your career where you kind of were overconfident or kind of took on, obviously, a case that you didn't realize would be so tough?
Thankfully, no, but I did have 2 different, surprisingly, both English bulldogs that had real tough issues. And I was super lucky to have great clients attached to those very difficult dogs. Because if I didn't have good clients, with one of them, I would have told them that they needed to rehome or potentially even euthanize the dog. They had 3 kids, and this dog would just actively attack any of the children when they came in the home. So the dog's life was basically gated to a living room.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And crazy enough, what ended up being the best solution was a squirt gun to this dog's face.
Yep.
And, a lot of training, a lot of working with the kids. They had like I don't want to say like a garage, type industrial space for where they worked out of. And so we would take the dog there and have the kids work the dog, go on walks with the dog, that kind of stuff. And, and was able to, that one just took a lot of time. I did try to get them to come to a Larry Crone seminar because there was definitely some situations there that I felt like I didn't know how to handle like fast.
Sure.
But over time and their dedication, like they put in the work, they got the result they wanted. And the other bulldog was like a new rescue to this younger couple. And it would just, like I have one of these place cots is metal. It's got like teeth marks because he would bite this thing and pull it across the room.
Yeah.
And I mean, he tried to tell this dog to sit and he's like wanting to fight you. So that dog, the guy was a coach. I think he coached football and basketball maybe. So again, good client.
Yep.
He took coaching well and we were able to move past and get the dog to settle in better with him. So, and his story, his name's Tug, funny enough, and he would tug and take anything he wanted. His story's featured on my website.
Nice. That's awesome. And I think that people don't realize, and it depends on the dog, people don't realize how effective a squirt bottle could be. And
totally,
it's just dog dependent, but we're so focused on what can stop this behavior. It could be something so simple.
Or we're so focused on what can I lure the dog with? Like we'll try backflips, treats, toys, play, all sorts of things, but we're not always, and this is something I think Jay Jack says a lot, but we're not always as creative when it comes to punishment because nobody likes that word when it comes to dogs. But if a dog doesn't know when it's failed, in my opinion, that's super unfair.
Yeah.
Because how do we give it clarity? I mean, most dogs spend the majority of their life in confusion.
Yep.
So yes, we can give them clarity when they succeed, but I think it's just as important for them to know when they've made a mistake.
Yeah. And as soon as you mentioned the spray bottle, that was the first person I thought of was Jay. Because I within the last year or 2 years or so, I really got into his stuff and went to one of the seminars. My friend Eric of Loose Leash Canine, shout out to him, really introduced me to a lot of Jay's concepts, especially spring pull. That's really helped my one dog just kind of just level out and relax. He gets to go hang on that tree and spin around. And I also get to have fun and do obedience with it, out and heel and do all his stuff. And it's like 5 minutes of that compared to me having to walk him probably miles if I really wanted to satisfy him. So much better for both of us. And yeah, that stuff has been a big blessing. A lot of Jay's teachings are awesome. And I plan to actually have one of the GRC judges come up and do an SR test here in, I think, April. So I'm planning on bringing that here a little bit, hopefully, and go from there. But yeah, no, that's just like you said, the clarity. And that's a big a word that Jay says a lot, clarity, and a lot of trainers in general, but not having the clarity of right and wrong, only giving them the clarity of what was right, but then not showing them something was incorrect. That's where you get equals confusion. And being confused relates to poor choices because they don't know. So I think that point you made is excellent. And going off of those stories, I know we talked about it prior to getting on and recording officially. I want to talk about what you feel is your biggest success story or one of your biggest success stories of your career. And that, I believe, is Sully. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I actually called the owner last night because I wanted to sort of double check back in and just see how things have been. Sully is a Border Collie, Blue Heeler, Australian Shepherd mix. So all the funnest breeds together. And he's deaf. The owner initially, I think, got the dog for her sister, if I'm remembering correctly. And they found out after a while that the dog was deaf. The owner who currently had the dog, no one really believed her. She's like, I swear. She's like, I'm clapping, I'm doing all this stuff. Like the dog doesn't even it's like completely not responsive to sound. So they find out that he is deaf. And as he gets older, he starts to kind of become reactive and human aggressive. He won't come inside when called. He'll stay outside when it's downpouring or freezing cold.
Wow.
So worked on, I think we did about 8 lessons with him, and just worked on teaching him how to heal. We used the e-collar. We developed a platform of language of different ways that we could communicate with him to mean different commands. And, when I checked in with her last night, she's like, yep, he'll recall inside. We had my family in town for the holidays, and he was able to hang out with everybody. Used to be pretty reactive to his sibling, which actually her sister, the owner's sister, has. So they have 2 from the same litter. And now they can all kind of hang out together. Was real reactive to her brother and the brother's family. And I guess her mom went through a lot of different things recently health-wise. And without sharing too much, had to be on chemo, lost her hair. And one of the first times that she was back from being sick, Sully was just the sweetest he's ever been to a stranger. And it's that beautiful thing of how dogs can just really know certain things. And I mean, hey, look, they can smell cancer. I'm sorry, buddy, I know. That something was up, and he was just super sweet, kind of laid his head on her lap and let her pet him and give him all sorts of love. So when she called me, she was crying, and she was told that she should put the dog down.
Wow.
So to, be able, and that was last year, I think it was late 2022 into 23 late 23 into 2024. I don't ever know what year it is or day.
Same. It's 2025 now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But it was great to check in and hear from her last night that everything's been going good. I think we're going to link up just because she wanted to, see if you'd remember me.
It's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. You really love to see that transformation after, and also the appreciation from the clients. I'm sure that you guys have a great, almost like a friendship now at this point, and building those kind of relationships is really what it's about. It's not just here we go, do a couple lessons and see you later. I'm always big on keeping up with my clients. I always try to ask them how they're doing, if they need anything, and always tell them that I'm here after no matter what. So I think that's great that you have that, and that's an awesome success story.
The more that you follow up with people, the more likely they are to refer us.
100%. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
And ask for reviews too. Make sure if you think you did a good job, I always try to ask people, are you happy? Do you have anything you want to cover still that we haven't? And if you're happy, can you do me this favor? If you ask that, can you do me this favor? Can you give me this, write me a review here and give them the information? You can even have a QR code on your phone. You can send them the link. I mean, I have stuff in my pole barn. I have it on my door. I don't take advantage as much as I should, but it's a QR code and it goes right to my Google page. So try to do the work up front. And then if they're happy, ask for reviews. The reviews really go hand in hand with getting business, because for me, I haven't advertised since before my surgery, and I've been getting inquiries, not a crazy amount, but I'm still getting a decent amount of inquiries because people Googled me and I have, 75 or so 5-star reviews. That plays a big part in you building your business and getting clients and the referrals thereafter, obviously. And that's where I started with referrals. And you have to build on that though and keep getting referrals. So I think that is a big part of it.
Absolutely.
So I was going to say too, how you said about dogs being able to sense. I feel like when I took my one dog, Dexter, to Jay, he called him kind of primal. And it's kind of funny because when I'm not feeling well, Dexter will try to take advantage of me instead of being chill. He'll know I'm not fucking feeling good. And he'll be like, cool. Yeah. What can I do today to make it a little more difficult and run this person today? So that's just the total polar opposite. That's what we call it.
That's how
a dickhead.
That's how my husky was. When I first got her from the shelter, she was perfect the first 3 months. And then as she started to learn my habits and routine, so here's a good leash in the house story that's also related to cystic fibrosis for any dog owners who have CF and may encounter this problem. My husky, who didn't want to be restless, would get mad when she knew that I was about to do my vest. She's like, all right, well, you're going to hook up to the vest. You're going to do your nebulizers. You're going to not pay attention to me for 30 minutes.
Yep.
And she would jump up on my couch and try to fight me. She would like try to mouth me. She would, wrestle and essentially try to keep me from sitting down and doing it. So whenever I knew I was about to do my meds, I had to put the leash on her, go stand on it, and then start my meds.
Okay.
And I did that for like 2 weeks maybe before I stopped holding the leash, before I removed the leash completely. And now, thankfully I don't need to, but like if I had to get up in the middle of the night and go do my meds, she would follow me down and come sit by me.
That's funny.
So
that's awesome. Speaking of that too, with doing your medications and your therapy and all that, how do you balance your work life and your health? Because that's a big thing, not only with us especially, but people in everyday life. What are some of your daily disciplines that keep you on track?
I keep up with my vest, and I'm really diligent about that.
Yep.
Because I know that's what allows me to continue it all. And I do 41 sit-ups and 41 push-ups and 41 squats every day.
Wow.
One for each year of my life.
Nice.
That just kind of helps with my physical side of things. Cause like I used to have a membership to a gym, but I'm gonna be real, when I'm trying to run my own business, the priority of like going to try to build muscle is just not as high up on the list.
Sure.
So, but I still want to fit it in. I still want to, keep up with it to some degree. So that's been my way to do that. And I take a nap almost every day. I mean, even if it's just for 20 minutes, I try to get somewhere between a 20 and a 90-minute nap. Just because when you're especially doing board and trains, you're with the dogs. You're not really off the clock until you put the dog in the crate at the end of the night.
Yeah.
And, it's taxing. So I don't sleep very well overnight either.
Yeah.
And I know that about myself. So that's one of the reasons why I do sleep during the day, because I actually can see through my watch that I go into a deeper REM sleep. So I know how.
During your naps?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's wild. You must be tired because you don't sleep good, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I like when there's that space and time to do it, my brain like won't.
That's it.
But when it's like this short window, it goes hard.
Wow.
And I have crazy dreams too during the day.
Yeah. That's awesome though that you actually are able to do that, because I drink way too much coffee to even consider a nap. So
yeah.
And I think that would probably be better for me not to drink coffee and just take a nap. So maybe that's something I'll do. So take a nap is one of the main priorities maybe for me. But yeah, so going off that a little bit, we're running a little bit short on time, but I want to talk a little bit about some mental health stuff before we end this. And I would love for you to give people some resources, and I can chime in too. But I feel like both with the dog training industry, if you don't put boundaries in, you can really get yourself pretty much mentally abused, where you're not setting any boundaries and you're making it really hard on yourself. And that's an issue I had where it really broke me down, where I was just, yes, I can do this, and push myself to a point of physical stuff too, where my back was gone, and I was just trying too much. So what are some things that you've dealt with mental health wise, both CF related, and how did you combat those?
Yeah. I go to therapy. I found a great therapist. I've been going to her for, I think, like 13 years now.
Nice.
And at varying, levels of frequency, sometimes weekly. Right now I'm at a point where I go every other week. Sometimes I stop for a little while and then realize, nope, I still need that. I did also, mostly because of Trikafta's side effects, end up starting an SSRI antidepressant. I initially started Lexapro and gained 17 pounds, within 3-4 months. It was kind of crazy. My stepdad had just passed away, and then Lexapro. And so I was just eating empty, just endlessly. It was I just finished a meal and now I'm snacking again. And it was I was almost trying to eat to fill a void or something.
Got it.
And we switched to a different one. Now I'm on Effexor, and I've lost all that weight that I had put on. And one of the most important things, especially when it comes to people with a chronic illness or people who are dog trainers or just run a business, quite frankly, is to maintain an identity outside of that. And I think sometimes it's so easy if you have CF to just kind of like stay in that community and have to deal with it on your own or with those people. And that comes back to what we talked about earlier, is just like, if you hide stuff, how do you process it and talk with someone about it?
Yep.
So it's like way healthier to share and just try to, face the embarrassment or shame that you might feel about it head on, so that it goes away. I don't really feel shame anymore about it. I used to really fear how I sounded in class.
Yeah.
Like if I coughed too much, I'd want to walk out.
That's what I used to do. 100%.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I just think that you got to know your limitations. And that's a constant, that's something that's always changing.
Yeah.
And that's hard to accept too.
Yeah.
The older we get with CF, our limitations change. In 2016, almost died. I was coughing up a lot of blood and went into the hospital. I was there for about 13 days total. And on the back end of that, I was on disability for a long time. And I did my meds like crazy. At that point, I was able to work out a lot. I got my health back. And then I became a dog trainer. So
that's awesome.
The knowing your limitations can also help you regain them if you don't try to push too hard.
Yeah. And that's totally relative to me. And just hearing that, I'm like, man, for me, that's where I'm at right now. I had to regain my health back. I finally feel like I'm in a place to be able to deliver good results for my clients. And it took almost a half a year to feel better. It was a really long road of a second back surgery. And I had to prioritize my health first. Sometimes people really need to think, I need to prioritize my physical and mental health, because if I don't have that, I don't have anything. And that's cliche. People say that all the time, but it's the truth. You're not going to be able to train dogs if your mind isn't right, if your body isn't right. How are you going to be able to help people? And the way I've been able to build myself back up, and I feel like as a person, I'm better than ever in many ways, which is great. I can say that confidently for the first time, is I went away from dogs for a little bit and I really reconsidered a lot of things and how do I want it to look? I know my limitations right now are that if I try to go back to dogs full time without seeing how it goes, easing into it, I'll probably have a third back surgery really soon. So for me, it's like, what else can I do, but also have the enjoyment and the income from dogs? I'm going to do something else. So I went into real estate right now, and I'm starting going back into real estate for the first time in 5 years. And I'm learning that skill to be able to add to my portfolio in life. I don't want to just be dependent on just dogs now, because I can't, because my body has failed me twice now, and it's left me without income for 4 months two times. So 8 months out of the last 30-ish months, I don't want to do that again. Right. So some of it was my own doing, though. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't doing PT stretches like I do now for my back, and I wasn't working out. I'm doing all that now. I'm also like learning another skill in piano. I'm just doing that for fun. I'm learning piano.
Awesome.
Learning piano. So like people that are struggling, if you can make best use of your time by learning new skills, and even if it just becomes a hobby, great. But you may see that, okay, yeah, I love doing stuff with dogs, but I want to do other things too. And like you said, that's part of your identity outside of dogs. That's a huge problem with trainers, new trainers, old trainers. That's all you are, is a dog trainer. And that's all we talk about is training dogs. And people are just like this guy again, talking about training dogs. But yeah, so skill building, therapy too. That's what I started about 7-8 months ago. That's helped a lot. And psychiatry is obviously good too. And those things we have to find the right balance and who is the right fit, just like finding anything in life, what's the right fit and the right balance. So all those things play part in also leisure activity, your own taking care of yourself. All those things play a part in who you are and how you feel.
Yeah, be willing to find the right therapist, to find the right medication, because you can't just hit the bullseye on the first chance.
100%. Now, as we're about to wrap up, do you have anything to tell new trainers starting off? Is there any advice you'd share with them? Or new dog owners, you can pick.
I would say if there was one thing I could get Nico, if there was one thing I could get every dog owner to do differently, it would be to feed better food.
Better food. Okay.
And I really wish that Purina One wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many of my clients feed that food.
Yep.
It's like, usually if you buy a better quality kibble, it's going to cost less because it has a higher caloric intent. So you may equal out, even though like the actual cost of your other food is cheaper, the stuff that you can buy that has a higher caloric intake, you feed less.
Sure.
So whereas like my German Shepherd, who's 100 pounds, he would probably need 4 cups of Purina One, a whole cup of which is just filler.
Yeah.
And with what we feed him, he eats 2 3/4 for the whole day.
Got that.
So I think that we don't understand fully how much nutrition affects our dogs.
Yep.
And we should, because of how much it affects ourselves.
Yep.
So, I mean, is it going to make your dog sit faster? No, but it's going to keep them healthy, and a healthy dog is more willing to do stuff that we ask of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like us, the gut, gut and brain is connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would just take a page out of Jay Jacks and just say, play with your dog. It's so underestimated to have fun with your dog. And we see all these cool videos online and we wish our dog could do this or that, but the way there is to make a really solid relationship.
Yep.
Have fun with your dogs, and they're willing to do more for us because we're enjoyable.
100%. Yeah. Try not to worry too much about having perfect obedience and really live in the moment, just like the dogs do. Try to enjoy the time that we have with them and make the best of it. So I love that. And I just want to thank you again for sharing so much time. I didn't expect us to go 70 minutes, but hey, I think we had a great conversation. And I hope that whether you're a dog owner, somebody with CF, or a dog trainer, I hope that you could take something from it. I think you will. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Before you do go, I do want you to make some closing remarks in terms of your social media.
Sure.
If you can share those links with us, you can just tell us what your Instagram and your Facebook is, and we'll be on our way.
Yeah, on Instagram, I am _dogpaw. And on Facebook, I am the Dogpaw Canine Training.
Nice.
You can also check me out on my personal page, which is just Nicholas Bell. And I'm always happy to connect with people who love dogs.
Awesome. Well, everybody, that was...
Or snowboarding.
Snowboarding? Nice. Hell yeah. That's something I won't do.
That's my identity outside of...
They'll have me in a Jazzy going down the mountain. But everybody, that was the first ever episode of the Dog Trainer Thoughtbook, and that was Nicholas Bell.
Thanks, man.
I hope you all have a good day and stay tuned for more episodes. Peace out.